Picture this. You're at your dream engagement party, surrounded by everyone you love, when suddenly your ex-boyfriend storms in, holding a 5-year-old boy's hand, screaming that you've been hiding his son from him. Your heart stops. Your fiancé goes pale. Your entire family stares in shock. But here's the thing. You've never seen that child before in your life. And what happens next? Well, let's just say my fiancé had a surprise of his own that nobody saw coming. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. 3 weeks ago, I thought I had my life figured out. My name is Alice, I'm 28 years old, and I was about to marry the love of my life in what I believed would be the perfect fairy tale ending. Ryan Mitchell had proposed to me 6 months earlier on a beach in Monterey, California, with a ring that took my breath away and a speech that made me cry happy tears for an hour straight. The engagement party was scheduled for Saturday evening at the Grandview Country Club in Sacramento, a beautiful venue overlooking the valley that Ryan's family had been members of for decades. We'd spent weeks planning every detail, from the ivory and gold decorations to the 3-course dinner menu featuring my grandmother's famous apple tart recipe for dessert. I should probably back up and tell you about Marcus. Marcus Caldwell was my college boyfriend. We dated for 2 years at UC Berkeley, and honestly, it was one of those relationships that was passionate but completely toxic. He was charming when he wanted to be, but he had this explosive temper and a jealous streak that made me walk on eggshells constantly. We broke up 4 years ago after a particularly nasty fight where he accused me of cheating with a study group partner. The accusation was completely false, but it was the final straw in a relationship that had been suffocating me for months. After Marcus, I took a year to focus on myself, finished my marketing degree, and started working at a digital agency in San Francisco. That's where I met Ryan 2 years later. Ryan was everything Marcus wasn't: steady, supportive, genuinely kind, and he had this amazing way of making me feel safe and valued. He worked in law enforcement, though he was always pretty vague about the specifics. He'd just say he worked for the state and handled complex cases. I figured he was probably a detective or something similar, but Ryan was private about his work life, and I respected that boundary. The morning of our engagement party, I woke up in my apartment in Oakland feeling nothing but pure excitement. My best friend Jessica had spent the night, and we were getting ready together while drinking mimosas and blasting Taylor Swift. Ryan had stayed at his place the night before because he said he had some work things to wrap up, but he'd promised to meet me at the venue by 5 o'clock to greet guests together. I'd chosen a flowing navy blue dress that made me feel elegant but not overdressed. After all, this wasn't the wedding, just the celebration before it. Jessica helped me with my hair, creating these loose curls that cascaded over one shoulder, and my makeup was glowing but natural. I wanted to look like myself, just the best possible version. We arrived at the country club at 4:30, and everything looked absolutely perfect. The event coordinator, Mrs. Patterson, had outdone herself. The main dining room was decorated with ivory roses and baby's breath, gold charger plates gleamed under the warm lighting, and there was even a photo booth area with props that Jessica had insisted we include. About 60 people were invited: close family, college friends, co-workers, and some of Ryan's law enforcement colleagues I'd met at various barbecues and gatherings over the past year. Ryan showed up right on time, looking incredibly handsome in a charcoal gray suit with a tie that matched my dress perfectly. He kissed me softly and whispered in my ear that I looked beautiful, and for a moment, everything felt absolutely right with the world. His parents, David and Carol Mitchell, were already there chatting with my mom and dad, and I could see how happy everyone was for us. The cocktail hour went smoothly. People were mingling, laughing, taking photos, and sharing embarrassing stories about both Ryan and me. My college roommate Emma gave a hilarious speech about how I used to practice writing Alice Mitchell in my notebooks during economics class years before I even met Ryan. Everyone was in such good spirits, and I remember thinking that this was exactly how I'd always imagined my engagement party would feel: warm, joyful, and full of love from the people who mattered most to us. We were about halfway through dinner when it happened. I was sitting at the head table next to Ryan, listening to his college buddy Jake tell a story about their police academy days, when suddenly the main doors to the dining room burst open with a loud bang that made everyone stop talking and turn around. And there was Marcus. He looked almost exactly the same as he had 4 years ago. Same dark hair that was slightly too long, same intense brown eyes, same leather jacket that he thought made him look mysterious. But there was something different about his expression, something desperate and wild that immediately made my stomach drop. But he wasn't alone. Holding his hand was a little boy, maybe 5 years old, with light brown hair and big green eyes that were wide with confusion and fear. The child was wearing a small blue button-down shirt and khaki pants, like he'd been dressed up for something special, and he kept looking around the room at all the staring adults with obvious anxiety. The entire room went dead silent. 60 people stopped eating, stopped talking, stopped moving, and just stared at this unexpected interruption. I could feel my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Marcus scanned the room until his eyes found mine, and then he started walking directly towards our table with determined, angry steps. The little boy stumbled slightly trying to keep up, and I noticed he was gripping a small stuffed dinosaur in his free hand. "Alice!" Marcus shouted, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Alice, we need to talk, right now." I stood up on shaky legs, aware that everyone was watching this scene unfold like it was a movie. Ryan immediately stood beside me, his hand protective on my lower back, and I could feel the tension radiating from his body. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" I managed to say, though my voice came out much quieter than I intended. He stopped about 10 feet from our table, still holding the boy's hand, and his expression was a mixture of anger and something that looked almost like hurt. "Private event?" he repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You mean the engagement party where you're celebrating marrying someone else while you've been keeping my son a secret from me for 5 years?" The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually took a step backward, bumping into Ryan, who steadied me with his hands on my shoulders. "Your son?" I said, the words feeling foreign and impossible in my mouth. "Marcus, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen this child before in my life." The little boy looked up at Marcus with confusion written all over his face, and I heard him whisper, "Daddy, you said we were going to see Mommy, but that's not Mommy." The room erupted in whispers and gasps. I saw my mother's face go white with shock, and my father half stood from his chair like he was preparing to intervene. Ryan's grip on my shoulders tightened, and I could practically feel the protective energy radiating from him. Marcus's face twisted with what looked like genuine pain. "Don't lie to me, Alice. His name is Connor, he's 5 years old, and he's been asking about his mommy for months. Do the math. He was born 9 months after we broke up. You disappeared, moved cities, changed your phone number, and you never told me you were pregnant." I stared at the little boy, Connor, and tried to process what Marcus was saying. The timeline he was suggesting was impossible. After our breakup, I'd thrown myself into finishing school and starting my career. I'd been single for over a year, focusing on healing from the toxic relationship and rebuilding my confidence. There was absolutely no way I could have been pregnant and not known it, let alone giving birth to a child and somehow forgotten about it. "Marcus," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fact that my entire world felt like it was spinning out of control. "I was never pregnant. I never had a baby. I don't know who this little boy is, but he's not my son." That's when Connor tugged on Marcus's jacket and said in a small, clear voice that somehow carried across the silent room, "Daddy, can we go home now? I want to see real Mommy." Connor's innocent words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. The confusion on his little face was heartbreaking, and I watched as Marcus's confident expression began to crack around the edges. He looked down at Connor, then back at me, and for the first time since he'd burst through those doors, I saw uncertainty flicker across his features. "What do you mean, real Mommy?" Marcus asked Connor, his voice suddenly much quieter than it had been moments before. The entire dining room was still frozen, 60 pairs of eyes watching this bizarre scene unfold, like we were actors in some twisted soap opera. Connor looked up at Marcus with those big green eyes and said matter-of-factly, "Mommy is at home with baby Emma. You said we were going to visit the lady who looked like me, but this lady doesn't look like me at all." My heart was racing, but suddenly pieces of a puzzle I didn't even know existed started clicking into place. I looked more carefully at Connor, really looked at him. His hair was light brown, mine was dark blonde. His eyes were green, mine were blue. His facial features were delicate and angular, while mine were rounder and softer. Now that I was actually paying attention, instead of being shocked into paralysis, this child looked nothing like me. "Marcus," I said, my voice growing stronger as my initial panic began transforming into something closer to anger. "Who is this child's actual mother?" But before Marcus could answer, Ryan stepped forward, and something in his posture had changed completely. Gone was the supportive fiancé who'd been standing protectively behind me. Instead, he looked like he was in full work mode, alert, authoritative, and completely focused on Marcus in a way that made me realize I'd never actually seen Ryan in his professional element before. "Sir," Ryan said, his voice carrying a level of command I'd never heard from him, "I'm going to need you to explain exactly how you obtained this child and why you brought him here." Marcus whirled around to face Ryan fully for the first time, and I saw his eyes narrow with immediate dislike. "And who exactly are you to be asking me questions about my son?" "I'm Agent Ryan Mitchell, FBI," Ryan said calmly, and I swear my heart actually stopped beating for a full second. "And based on what this child just said, I have serious concerns about the circumstances here." FBI. My fiancé was FBI. Not just law enforcement, not just a detective handling complex cases for the state. Federal Bureau of Investigation. I stood there feeling like I was watching this entire scene happen to someone else, because there was no way my quiet, steady Ryan was revealing himself to be a federal agent at my engagement party, while my ex-boyfriend stood there with a confused child claiming to be my secret son. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The room erupted in whispers again, but Ryan raised his hand and somehow his presence commanded immediate silence. Even my own family members, who'd known him for over a year, were staring at him like he'd just revealed he was from another planet. "Marcus," Ryan continued, his tone professional, not unkind, "I need you to tell me right now who this child's mother is and how you came to have custody of him tonight." Marcus's face had gone pale, and he was looking back and forth between Ryan and the dining room full of people, like he was realizing for the first time that this situation had spiraled completely beyond his control. Connor was still holding his hand, but the little boy was starting to look scared, and he pressed closer to Marcus's leg. Marcus started, then stopped. He looked down at Connor, then back at me, and I saw something that looked almost like panic cross his face. "His mother she's my girlfriend, Sarah Winters. She lives in Portland." "And where does Sarah think Connor is right now?" Ryan asked, pulling out his phone with movements so smooth and practiced that it was obvious he'd done this 1,000 times before. She thinks he's with me for the weekend," Marcus said, his voice getting smaller. "But Alice, I swear, I thought there was this woman at the grocery store last month, and she looked exactly like you, and she had this little boy with her who could have been Connor's twin, and she called him Connor, and I thought." Ryan was already dialing something on his phone, stepping slightly away from the group but keeping his eyes locked on Marcus. I could hear him speaking quietly but couldn't make out the words. Meanwhile, Connor tugged on Marcus's jacket again. "Daddy, I want to go home now. This isn't fun anymore. All these people are staring at us." The poor child was right. I suddenly became acutely aware that we had an audience of 60 people who were watching this personal crisis unfold in real time. My grandmother was clutching my grandfather's arm, my college friends were whispering frantically to each other, and Ryan's parents looked like they were trying to process the fact that their son had just revealed his career was completely different from what they'd understood. Marcus, I said, trying to keep my voice gentle for Connor's sake, I think you need to call Sarah right now and tell her where Connor is. I can't, Marcus said miserably. She doesn't know I brought him here. She thinks we're at the Children's Museum in Portland. If she finds out I drove him 3 hours to Sacramento based on seeing some random woman at a grocery store who looked like you, based on seeing some random woman who looked like me, I repeated incredulously. You kidnapped this child and crashed my engagement party because you saw someone at a grocery store? I didn't kidnap him, Marcus protested. I have visitation rights. I'm allowed to take him places. Ryan finished his phone call and walked back over to our group. Marcus, I just spoke with my colleagues in Portland. They're going to contact Sarah Winters to confirm Connor's whereabouts. In the meantime, I need you to understand that taking a child across state lines without the custodial parent's knowledge of the destination could constitute a serious federal crime. Marcus looked like he was about to be sick. I thought if Alice was hiding my son from me, I needed to confront her. I thought she'd been lying to me for 5 years. The woman I saw looked exactly like Alice, and the timing was right, and— What woman? I interrupted. Describe her. She was about your height, blonde hair, blue eyes, and she was with this little boy who looked just like Connor. She called him Connor, and he had the same stuffed dinosaur, and Marcus trailed off, looking down at the dinosaur in Connor's hand. Connor held up his toy. Lots of kids have dinosaurs like mine. Tommy at school has the same one. It's from the museum gift shop. The adults all stared at this 5-year-old who was displaying more logical thinking than any of us had managed in the past 20 minutes. Ryan knelt down to Connor's eye level, his entire demeanor shifting to become warm and reassuring. Hey, buddy, what's your favorite thing about your dinosaur? Connor's face lit up slightly. His name is Rex, and he's a T-Rex, and Mommy got him for me when we went to the museum for my birthday. Mommy says he's brave like me. That sounds pretty awesome, Ryan said. And you miss your mom right now, don't you? Connor nodded solemnly. I want to go home and have bedtime stories with Mommy and baby Emma. Ryan stood back up and looked at Marcus with an expression that was somewhere between professional sternness and genuine sympathy. Marcus, I think you need to call Sarah immediately and tell her exactly where you are. And then we need to figure out how to get Connor home safely. Marcus pulled out his phone with shaking hands, but before he could dial, it started ringing. He looked at the screen and went even paler than before. It's Sarah, he whispered. Answer it, Ryan said firmly, and put it on speaker. Marcus hesitated for just a moment, then accepted the call and held the phone so we could all hear. Marcus? Sarah's voice came through, and she sounded frantic. Marcus, where are you? I went to the Children's Museum to surprise you and Connor for lunch, and they said you never checked in. Your GPS shows you're in California. What the hell is going on? The silence in the dining room was deafening. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving and were watching this unfold from the doorway to the kitchen. Sarah, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. I can explain. Sarah, I can explain, Marcus repeated into the phone, but his voice was shaking so badly I wasn't sure she'd even be able to understand him. Explain what, Marcus? Sarah's voice crackled through the speaker, getting louder and more panicked by the second. Explain why you lied to me about where you were taking our son? Explain why my 5-year-old is 300 miles away from home? Explain why Connor's location tracker shows he's at some country club in Sacramento? I felt my eyebrows shoot up. Location tracker? I glanced at Ryan, who looked impressed despite the circumstances. You put a tracker on Connor? Ryan asked, his FBI training clearly kicking in as he processed this new information. It's a safety watch, Sarah's voice came through defensively. He wears it everywhere in case he gets lost. Marcus, you have exactly 30 seconds to tell me what's going on before I call the police. The police are already here, Ryan said, stepping closer to the phone. Ma'am, this is FBI agent Ryan Mitchell. Your son is safe, but we need to discuss this situation immediately. The silence on the other end of the line was so complete, I wondered if the call had dropped. Then Sarah's voice came back, but now it was the kind of deadly quiet that meant someone was about to completely lose it. FBI? Marcus, what did you do? Marcus looked around the room at all the staring faces. My family, Ryan's family, our friends, the country club staff who were still frozen in the doorways. Connor was tugging on his jacket again, getting more distressed by the minute as the tension in the room continued to escalate. I thought, Marcus started, then stopped and tried again. I saw a woman who looked exactly like Alice, and she had a little boy who looked just like Connor, and I thought Alice had been hiding my son from me, so I brought Connor here to confront her. You thought what? Sarah's voice exploded through the speaker so loudly that several people in the dining room actually jumped. Marcus Anthony Caldwell, are you telling me that you kidnapped our son and drove him to another state because you saw some random woman at a grocery store? I didn't kidnap him, Marcus protested. I have visitation rights. Visitation rights don't include lying to me about where you're taking him and driving him 300 miles away based on some delusional theory, Sarah shot back. And who is Alice? Is this the ex-girlfriend you're always talking about? The one you claim was the love of your life? The entire room went dead silent again. I felt heat creep up my neck as 60 pairs of eyes turned to look at me with renewed interest. This was definitely not how I'd imagined my engagement party going. Sarah, I said, stepping closer to the phone, my name is Alice, and I'm the ex-girlfriend Marcus is referring to. But I want you to know that I have never seen your son before tonight, and I had no idea Marcus even had a child. Of course you didn't, Sarah said, and now her voice was full of exhausted frustration rather than panic. Because Marcus never told you about Connor. He never told you that he got his life together, went to therapy, started co-parenting responsibly, and has been in a committed relationship for 3 years. He just kept living in this fantasy world where you were going to come back someday. I looked at Marcus, who had gone completely red and was staring at the floor like he wished it would open up and swallow him whole. Connor was still pressed against his leg, clutching his dinosaur and looking increasingly upset by all the shouting. Marcus, I said quietly, is that true? Have you been telling Sarah about me this whole time? Not like that, Marcus mumbled. Sometimes I'd mention that we used to date and obsess over why I left and talk about how different things could have been and compare me to Alice constantly. Marcus, I've been patient with this for 3 years, but this is the final straw. You literally kidnapped our child to chase after a ghost. Ryan stepped forward again, his professional demeanor firmly in place. Sarah, I understand you're upset, and you have every right to be, but right now we need to focus on getting Connor home safely. Are you able to come to Sacramento, or would you prefer that we arrange for Connor to be brought back to Portland? I'm already in my car, Sarah said grimly. I'll be there in about 4 hours, and I'm bringing my lawyer. Marcus's face went white. Sarah, please, let's not involve lawyers. This was just a misunderstanding. You thought wrong, Sarah interrupted, and your thinking puts our son at risk. Connor, baby, are you there? Can you hear Mommy? Connor perked up at the sound of Sarah's voice addressing him directly. Mommy, I want to come home. Daddy said we were going to see you, but you're not here, and everyone is yelling, and I don't like it. I know, sweetheart. Mommy is coming to get you, okay? I need you to stay close to Daddy and be brave for just a little bit longer. Okay, Mommy, but can you bring baby Emma when you come? I miss her. Emma is staying home with Grandma tonight, but you'll see her tomorrow, I promise. Ryan knelt down next to Connor again. Hey, buddy, while we're waiting for your mom, are you hungry? I bet the kitchen here has some really good food. Connor nodded shyly. I like chicken nuggets.
I bet they have those, Ryan said with a smile. Then he looked up at Mrs. Patterson, the event coordinator, who had been watching this entire scene unfold with wide eyes. Of course, we have a small private dining room just off the main hall. I'll have the kitchen prepare something child-friendly right away. Thank you, Ryan said. Then he turned to address the room full of guests, who were still sitting in stunned silence. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this disruption to what should have been a celebration. We're going to move the situation to a private area so that the rest of you can continue enjoying your evening. My father stood up from his table. Alice, do you need us to stay? I looked around at all the concerned faces of my family and friends, people who had come here tonight to celebrate Ryan and I starting our life together, and instead had gotten front row seats to the most bizarre confrontation imaginable. No, Dad, it's okay, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Ryan has everything under control. As I said it, I realized it was true. Despite the fact that he'd just dropped a major bomb about his real career, Ryan was handling the situation with a level of calm competence that was actually reassuring. Actually, Ryan said, Alice, I think it would be good if your parents stayed, and mine too. There are going to be some questions that need to be answered, and it would be helpful to have family support. Sarah's voice came through the phone again. I'm going to hang up now so I can concentrate on driving. Marcus, do not move from wherever you are until I get there. And Connor, Mommy loves you very much. Love you too, Mommy, Connor said softly. The line went dead, and Marcus slowly put his phone back in his pocket. The silence in the room was deafening. Connor looked up at Marcus with those big green eyes and said, Daddy, are you in trouble? Mommy sounded really mad. Marcus knelt down to Connor's level, and for the first time since he'd burst through those doors, he looked like he was actually thinking about someone other than himself. Yeah, buddy, Daddy made some bad choices tonight, but that's not your fault, okay? You didn't do anything wrong. Connor nodded solemnly, then looked over at me. Are you really not my other mommy? The question was so innocent and heartbreaking that I felt tears prick at my eyes. No, sweetie, I'm not, but I bet your real mommy loves you very, very much. She does, Connor said matter-of-factly. She reads me stories every night and makes pancakes shaped like dinosaurs on Sundays. Ryan stood up and looked at Marcus, who had an expression that was professional but not unkind. Marcus, while we're waiting for Sarah to arrive, I think you and I need to have a conversation about what happens next.
Mrs. Patterson quickly ushered us into the smaller private dining room, which felt like stepping from a fishbowl into a sanctuary. The space was intimate, with warm wood paneling and soft lighting, a stark contrast to the spectacle we'd just left behind. Connor immediately gravitated toward a window that overlooked the country club's garden, pressing his nose against the glass to watch the outdoor lights twinkling among the trees. The kitchen staff appeared within minutes with a plate of chicken nuggets, apple slices, and chocolate milk, along with some crayons and coloring pages featuring dinosaurs. Connor's face lit up for the first time all evening, and he settled into a chair at the far end of the table, completely absorbed in coloring a triceratops purple while munching on his dinner. My parents, David and Carol Mitchell, Ryan's mom and dad, Jessica, and a few other close family members had followed us into the private room. Everyone else had been gently encouraged to continue enjoying the party, though I suspected most of them were probably gossiping about what had just happened rather than eating their salmon. Ryan closed the door and turned to face Marcus, his entire posture screaming federal agent. It was surreal seeing him like this. The man I'd been planning to marry had somehow transformed into someone I barely recognized, yet strangely, I felt safer with him than I ever had before. Marcus, Ryan began, his voice calm but authoritative, I need you to understand the gravity of this situation. You transported a minor across state lines under false pretenses without the custodial parent's full knowledge of your destination or intentions. In the eyes of federal law, that constitutes potential kidnapping charges. Marcus sank into one of the chairs like his legs had given out. But I didn't kidnap him. I'm his father. I have custody rights. Custody rights that you violated the moment you lied to Sarah about where you were taking Connor, Ryan replied. Having visitation doesn't give you the right to take him wherever you want without the other parent's informed consent.
My mother, who had been unusually quiet through this entire ordeal, suddenly spoke up. Marcus, what I don't understand is how you could think Alice was hiding a child from you. You two broke up 4 years ago. If she'd had a baby, don't you think someone would have noticed? Her family, her friends, her coworkers? I wasn't thinking clearly, Marcus admitted, running his hands through his hair. When I saw that woman at the grocery store with the little boy who looked like Connor, something just snapped. I've been having a hard time lately, and Sarah's been talking about reducing my visitation because she thinks I'm not stable enough. And I guess I just... Wait, I interrupted. Sarah's been trying to reduce your visitation? Why? Marcus looked uncomfortable, glancing over at Connor, who was still happily coloring and seemed oblivious to our conversation. I've been having some issues, anger management problems mostly. I lost my job 3 months ago, and I've been struggling to find work, and Sarah thinks I'm not providing a stable environment for Connor. Ryan and I exchanged glances. This was starting to paint a much clearer picture of what had actually happened here. So you thought, Ryan said slowly, that if you could prove Alice had been hiding your child from you, it would somehow help your custody case with Connor? Not exactly, Marcus said miserably. I thought if Alice had my son, maybe she'd realize we were meant to be together, and we could be a family, and I could start over fresh, get away from all the mess I've made in Portland. The room went completely silent, except for the sound of Connor's crayon scratching against paper. I stared at Marcus in absolute disbelief. You thought I had your secret child? And instead of calling or texting or asking like a normal person, you decided to steal Connor and drag him 300 miles to crash my engagement party so we could, what, run away together? My voice was rising despite my efforts to keep it calm for Connor's sake. When you put it like that, it sounds crazy, mumbled. It is crazy, Jessica said, speaking up for the first time. She'd been my roommate in college and had witnessed firsthand how toxic my relationship with Marcus had been. Marcus, Alice moved on. She's happy. She's getting married to someone who clearly loves and respects her. What part of that made you think she wanted you back? I just thought, Marcus started, then trailed off. Ryan's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it quickly. That's my colleague in Portland. They've confirmed Connor's identity and Sarah's story. She's been cooperative with law enforcement and is currently driving here with her attorney as promised. David Mitchell, Ryan's father, had been listening to this entire exchange with increasing bewilderment. Son, he said finally, I think I speak for all of us when I say we had no idea you worked for the FBI. Why didn't you ever tell us? Ryan looked slightly embarrassed for the first time all evening. It's complicated, Dad. My unit works on sensitive cases, and we're encouraged to keep our professional lives private, even from family. I was planning to tell everyone after Alice and I got married and settled down. What kind of cases? My father asked, his curiosity clearly getting the better of him. I can't go into specifics, but I work with a task force that handles crimes involving children and families. Missing persons, custody disputes that cross state lines, child endangerment cases. Ryan glanced meaningfully at Connor. Cases exactly like this one, actually. Carol Mitchell looked at her son with a mixture of pride and concern. Is it dangerous work? Sometimes, Ryan admitted. But I'm good at it, and it's important work. Alice, he turned to me, I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I was going to tell you everything next week. I've been waiting for the right moment. I was still processing everything that had happened in the past 2 hours. My fiancé was FBI. My ex-boyfriend had kidnapped a child and crashed my engagement party based on a delusional fantasy. And somehow, through all of this chaos, I was discovering that I trusted Ryan more than I ever had before. I'm not mad about your job, I told him honestly. I'm actually impressed by how you're handling this whole situation. But I am a little hurt that you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth about what you do. It wasn't about trust, Ryan said quickly. It was about protecting you. The less people know about what I do, the safer everyone is. Connor looked up from his coloring at that moment. Are you a police officer? He asked Ryan with interest. Something like that, Ryan replied with a gentle smile. I help keep kids safe. That's a good job, Connor said seriously. Tommy at school says police officers are heroes. What do you want to be when you grow up, Connor? Jessica asked, clearly trying to keep the conversation light for his sake. A paleontologist, Connor said immediately. I want to dig up dinosaur bones and discover new ones that nobody has ever seen before. That sounds amazing, I said, and I meant it. Despite the insane circumstances, Connor was a sweet, intelligent little boy, and I could see why Sarah was so protective of him. Ryan's phone buzzed again. Sarah's about an hour out, he announced. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Have there been any other incidents recently where you've acted impulsively or made decisions that put Connor at risk? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him wrestling with something internally.
There was an incident last month, he finally admitted. Connor was with me for the weekend, and I took him to a bar with me because I wanted to watch a football game and I didn't want to miss my time with him. Someone called child services. The adults in the room all exchanged concerned looks. Marcus, my mother said gently, do you think you might benefit from talking to someone, a counselor or a therapist? Sarah's been saying the same thing, Marcus said quietly, but I keep thinking I can handle everything on my own. Connor finished coloring his dinosaur and held it up proudly. Look, I made him purple because that's my favorite color, and he's smiling because he found some friends to play with. The innocence of his statement hit everyone in the room like a wave. This little boy had no idea that his father's poor decisions were about to drastically change his life. The next hour passed in a strange bubble of forced normalcy. Connor finished his dinner and moved on to a second coloring page, this time creating what he proudly announced was a rainbow brontosaurus family. The adults took turns making small talk with him about school, his favorite subjects, and his baby sister Emma, while simultaneously trying to process the surreal situation we'd all found ourselves in. Ryan had stepped out twice to take phone calls, coordinating with his colleagues and what I assumed were legal authorities. Each time he returned, his expression was a little more serious than before. Marcus sat in the corner looking like a man who was slowly realizing the full magnitude of his actions, occasionally glancing at Connor with what appeared to be genuine remorse. I found myself studying Ryan in his professional element, and it was like seeing him through completely new eyes. The man I'd fallen in love with had always been calm and steady, but now I understood that those weren't just personality traits. They were professional skills honed through years of dealing with crisis situations. The way he spoke to Connor, the way he managed Marcus without escalating the tension, the way he seamlessly coordinated with law enforcement while keeping everyone in the room informed, it was actually impressive. Alice, my father said quietly, pulling me aside near the window, are you okay with all this? Finding out about Ryan's job, I mean? I thought about it for a moment, watching Ryan explain to Connor how the security cameras at the country club worked because the little boy had asked about the TV screens he'd noticed in the corners. Honestly, I think I'm more okay with it than I should be, I admitted. I mean, yes, I'm hurt, but he didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. But seeing him handle this situation, I understand why he's good at what he does, and I understand why it's important work. It's dangerous work, too, my father pointed out. Are you prepared for that reality? Before I could answer, Ryan's phone rang again. This time, instead of stepping out, he answered it in front of us. Agent Mitchell. Yes, she's here. Understood. We'll be ready. He hung up and looked around the room. Sarah has arrived. She's in the parking lot with her attorney. They'll be up in a few minutes. Connor's head snapped up from his coloring. Mommy's here? Yes, buddy, your mom is here, Ryan said gently. She's very excited to see you. Marcus visibly braced himself, running his hands through his hair repeatedly and adjusting his jacket like he was preparing for battle. What did she say? How angry is she? She's concerned about Connor's welfare, Ryan replied diplomatically, as she should be. Mrs. Patterson knocked on the door and entered with two women behind her. The first was clearly Sarah,
Mid-20s, with light brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and eyes that were red from crying but blazing with fury. She was wearing jeans and a Stanford University sweatshirt, like she'd literally jumped in her car and driven 4 hours without thinking about anything except getting to her son. The second woman was older, maybe in her 50s, wearing a sharp business suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Everything about her screamed attorney, from her perfectly styled gray hair to her no-nonsense expression. "Connor!" Sarah rushed across the room, and Connor launched himself out of his chair and into his mother's arms with a force that nearly knocked her over. "Mommy, you came! I missed you so much!" Connor buried his face in Sarah's neck, and she held him like she never planned to let him go again. "I missed you too, baby. Are you okay? Are you hurt?" Sarah was running her hands over Connor's hair and checking him over like she was looking for injuries. "I'm okay. The FBI man gave me chicken nuggets and let me color dinosaurs, but Daddy was confused about who my mommy was, and everyone was yelling, and I wanted to come home." Sarah's eyes found Marcus across the room, and the look she gave him could have frozen lava. "We'll talk about that later, sweetie. Right now, Mommy just wants to hold you." The attorney stepped forward and extended her hand to Ryan. "Agent Mitchell, I'm Jennifer Chen, Mrs. Winter's family law attorney. Thank you for ensuring Connor's safety." Ryan shook her hand professionally. "Of course. I assume you'll want to discuss the legal implications of tonight's events." "Among other things, yes." Jennifer's gaze shifted to Marcus, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Mr. Caldwell, I think we need to have a very serious conversation about your custody arrangement." "Sarah," Marcus started, taking a step toward her and Connor, "I can explain everything. I never meant for—" "Stop." Sarah's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Do not come any closer to us right now. Do not speak to me unless I ask you a direct question. And do not even think about trying to justify what you did tonight." Connor looked back and forth between his parents with obvious distress. "Mommy, why are you mad at Daddy?" Sarah's expression softened immediately when she looked at Connor. "Daddy made some bad choices tonight, sweetheart, but that's not your fault, and it's not something you need to worry about, okay?" Jennifer opened her briefcase and pulled out several documents. "Agent Mitchell, what charges is Mr. Caldwell potentially facing?" Ryan glanced at Marcus before answering. "That depends on several factors. The fact that he's Connor's biological father and has established visitation rights works in his favor. However, he transported Connor across state lines under false pretenses, lied to the custodial parent about their destination, and brought the child into what could be considered a confrontational situation." "In layman's terms?" Sarah asked, still holding Connor tightly. "He could be charged with custodial interference, which is a federal crime when it involves crossing state lines. The penalties can include fines and imprisonment." Marcus made a sound that was somewhere between a groan and a whimper. "Sarah, please, I'll do anything. I'll go to counseling, I'll take anger management classes, You should have thought about that before you kidnapped our son." "I didn't kidnap him." "Yes, you did." Sarah's voice rose, and Connor flinched in her arms. She immediately lowered her voice and rubbed his back soothingly. "Yes, you did, Marcus. You lied to me, you took him somewhere I didn't approve of, and you put him in a situation that could have been dangerous. What if this woman," she gestured toward me, "had been unstable? What if she'd called the police immediately? What if she'd been married to someone violent instead of an FBI agent? You didn't think any of this through because you were so wrapped up in your own delusions." Jennifer was taking notes throughout the exchange. "Mrs. Winters, do you want to press charges?" Sarah looked at Connor, who was listening to every word with wide, confused eyes. Then at Marcus, who looked utterly defeated.
"I want to talk to Connor alone first," she said finally. "I need to make sure he's really okay, and I need to understand exactly what he experienced tonight. Then I'll decide about charges." Ryan nodded. "That's completely reasonable. There's another small conference room down the hall where you can have privacy." "Thank you." Sarah stood up with Connor still in her arms, even though he was probably getting too big to carry comfortably. Connor, do you want to go somewhere quiet where it's just you and Mommy for a few minutes? Connor nodded against her shoulder. Can I bring my dinosaur pictures? Of course you can, baby. As Sarah carried Connor toward the door, he looked back over her shoulder at the room full of adults. His eyes found mine, and he gave me a small wave. Bye, lady who's not my other mommy, he said solemnly. I hope you have a nice wedding. The innocence of his goodbye hit me like a punch to the chest. This sweet little boy had been through an incredibly confusing and probably scary evening, all because of Marcus's delusional thinking and my complicated romantic history. Bye, Connor, I managed to say around the lump in my throat. I hope you have sweet dreams tonight. After Sarah and Connor left with Mrs. Patterson to find the other conference room, the remaining adults sat in heavy silence. Jennifer was still taking notes, Ryan was checking his phone, and Marcus was staring at his hands like they held the answers to all of life's problems. Marcus, Jennifer said finally, I strongly recommend that you retain your own attorney immediately. This situation is far more serious than a simple custody dispute. I don't have money for an attorney, Marcus said quietly. I've been unemployed for 3 months. Then you need to contact the public defender's office first thing Monday morning, Jennifer replied, because based on what I've witnessed tonight, Miss Winters has grounds to petition for supervised visitation only, if not a complete suspension of your parental rights. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Marcus looked up with panic in his eyes. She can't take Connor away from me. He's my son. I love him. Love isn't enough, Jennifer said bluntly. Children need stability, safety, and parents who make good decisions. Tonight, you demonstrated none of those qualities. The 20 minutes that Sarah spent alone with Connor felt like hours. The rest of us sat in uncomfortable silence, each lost in our own thoughts about how dramatically this evening had veered off course. Marcus had moved to a chair by himself and was staring out the window at the parking lot, occasionally running his hands through his hair in what seemed to be a nervous tic. Jennifer was organizing her paperwork with the methodical precision of someone who dealt with family crises for a living. Ryan was quietly coordinating with his colleagues via text message, and our parents were whispering among themselves, probably trying to process the fact that their children's engagement party had turned into a federal investigation. I found myself thinking about Connor's little wave goodbye and his solemn declaration that he hoped I'd have a nice wedding. The kid had been through something that would probably require therapy to fully process, yet he'd still managed to be polite and sweet in the midst of all the adult chaos. It made me angry at Marcus, in a way that even his initial accusation hadn't. Jessica, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally broke the silence. Alice, do you want to check on how the other guests are doing? I feel like we abandoned them pretty abruptly. That's actually a good idea, Ryan said, looking up from his phone. People are probably wondering what's happening. Maybe you could let them know that everything is under control and they should feel free to continue enjoying the party. The thought of going back out there and pretending everything was normal seemed surreal, but I realized Ryan was right. 60 people had come here tonight to celebrate with us, and they deserved some kind of explanation, even if it was a simplified version of events. I'll come with you, my mother offered, standing up and smoothing her dress. We should probably check on the catering situation too. I'm sure the staff is confused about whether to serve dessert. As we walked back toward the main dining room, I could hear the buzz of conversation and speculation. The moment we appeared in the doorway, the entire room went quiet and turned to look at us expectantly. Everyone, I said, trying to project confidence I didn't entirely feel, I want to apologize for the disruption to our celebration. The situation has been resolved, and the child is safely back with his mother. Ryan and I are incredibly grateful for your patience and understanding. My college friend Emma raised her hand tentatively. Alice, is everything really okay? That was pretty intense. It was a case of mistaken identity, I explained, which was technically true, even if it didn't capture the full scope of Marcus's delusions. My ex-boyfriend thought I was someone else and brought a child here by mistake, but everything has been sorted out and there's no danger to anyone.
Ryan's college buddy Jake, who I now realized probably knew about Ryan's FBI career, stood up and started clapping slowly. "Well, I think we all learned something new about Ryan tonight," he said, with a grin that suggested he'd been keeping Ryan's secret for years. "So how about we toast to Alice's engagement to the most modest federal agent in California?" The room erupted in surprised laughter and applause, and I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. These were people who cared about us, and they were choosing to focus on celebration rather than scandal. "There's still dessert to be served," Mrs. Patterson announced from the back of the room, "and the band is ready to start the dancing portion of the evening whenever you'd like." I looked around at all the faces of friends and family members who had come here tonight to share in our joy, and I made a decision. You know what? Let's have dessert. Let's dance. This is still our engagement party, and I don't want Marcus's problems to ruin what should be one of the happiest nights of our lives. A cheer went up from the crowd, and I felt a surge of affection for everyone in that room. Ryan appeared at my elbow, having followed us out of the private dining room. "How's Connor?" I asked quietly. "Sarah's talking to him about what happened. She's being very careful to frame it in terms he can understand without making him feel responsible for any of the adult drama." "And Marcus?" Ryan's expression grew more serious, still in there with Jennifer, discussing his options. "Alice, I need to tell you something. Based on what Sarah shared with me about Marcus's recent behavior, there's probably going to be an investigation into whether he's fit to have unsupervised visitize with Connor at all."
I felt a complex mix of emotions about that news. Marcus had been a terrible boyfriend, but he was Connor's father, and despite everything that had happened tonight, I could see that he genuinely loved his son. "Is that really necessary?" I asked. "I mean, what he did tonight was awful, but does it warrant taking his child away?" "It's not just tonight," Ryan explained quietly. "Remember the incident he mentioned about taking Connor to a bar? Sarah told me there have been others. He missed 2 scheduled pickups last month because he overslept and didn't answer his phone. He's been inconsistent with child support payments, and apparently he's been telling Connor stories about how Mommy and Daddy might get back together someday, which Sarah says is confusing and upsetting for Connor." I sighed, looking out at our friends and family who were now chatting and laughing as if nothing unusual had happened. So this wasn't just about me. This was about Marcus struggling with his entire life. Exactly. You were just the catalyst that triggered his worst impulses. The band started playing soft background music, and couples began moving toward the small dance floor that had been set up in one corner of the room. Ryan extended his hand to me with a tentative smile. "I know this isn't exactly how we planned our engagement party," he said, "but would you like to dance with your FBI agent fiancé?" I took his hand and let him lead me onto the dance floor. As we swayed to the music, surrounded by the people we loved most, I felt like I was finally processing everything that had happened. "Ryan," I said softly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Okay. Are there going to be other situations like this? I mean, not necessarily involving my ex-boyfriends and kidnapped children, but dangerous situations where your work puts us or our future family at risk?" Ryan was quiet for a moment, considering his answer carefully. "The nature of my work means there's always some level of risk. But what happened tonight actually had nothing to do with my job. It was about your past relationship. If anything, my training helped us handle the situation better than it might have been handled otherwise." "But you said you work on cases involving missing children and family crimes. That sounds like it could be dangerous." "It can be," Ryan admitted. "But Alice, I've been doing this work for 8 years, and I'm good at it. I take precautions, I work with a team, and I follow protocols that are designed to keep everyone safe. The bigger question is whether you can handle being married to someone whose job sometimes involves uncertainty and risk." I thought about how he'd handled Marcus tonight. Calm, professional, protective, but not aggressive. I thought about the way he'd been gentle with Connor while still maintaining authority with the adults. I thought about how he'd managed to diffuse a potentially explosive situation while keeping everyone safe. "I think I can handle it," I said finally. "But I need you to promise me something." "What's that?" "No more secrets. If you're working on a case that could affect us, I want to know.
If you're going to be in a dangerous situation, I want to be prepared for it. I can't support you if I don't know what's really going on. Ryan pulled me closer and kissed the top of my head. I promise, no more secrets. Good, I said, then pulled back to look at him. Now, Agent Mitchell, I believe you owe me a proper engagement party dance. He spun me around with a flourish that made me laugh, and for a moment, all the chaos of the evening faded away. This was what mattered. This connection, this trust, this partnership we were building together. Sarah appeared in the doorway of the main dining room, scanning the crowd until she spotted us. She made her way over with a purposeful stride, and Ryan and I stepped apart to talk with her. "How's Connor?" I asked immediately. "He's okay," Sarah said, though she looked exhausted. Confused about why Daddy brought him to see a stranger, but okay. He actually fell asleep in the other room. The stress of the evening caught up with him. "And what did you decide about pressing charges?" Ryan asked professionally. Sarah looked between Ryan and me, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and determination. "I'm not pressing federal charges," she said finally, "but that doesn't mean Marcus is getting off easy." Ryan noted professionally. "What did you decide?" "Jennifer and I are petitioning the court for supervised visitation only. Marcus won't be allowed to take Connor anywhere alone until he completes a court-mandated psychological evaluation, anger management courses, and parenting courses. And every visit has to be supervised by a neutral third party at a designated facility." I felt a complex swirl of emotions about that decision. It was probably the right call for Connor's safety, but I couldn't help feeling partly responsible for how Marcus's life was about to be turned upside down. "Sarah," I said hesitantly, "I'm really sorry about all this. I know none of it is your fault, and you and Connor got dragged into Marcus's issues with me." Sarah studied my face for a moment, and some of the hardness in her expression softened. "Alice, can I ask you something?" "Of course. How bad was he when you were dating? Marcus, I mean. Because the Marcus I fell in love with 3 years ago was gentle and funny and seemed to have his life together. But lately, I've been seeing glimpses of someone else. And tonight was like meeting a complete stranger." I glanced at Ryan, who nodded encouragingly. "He was controlling and jealous," I said honestly. "He had a terrible temper when things didn't go his way. He was charming when he wanted to be, but he could turn mean in an instant if he felt threatened or rejected. I spent 2 years walking on eggshells around him." "Did he ever hurt you physically?" Sarah asked quietly. "No, but he came close a few times. He would punch walls or throw things when he was angry. I always felt like I was one argument away from becoming his target instead of the furniture." Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "I should have trusted my instincts. The past few months, I've been making excuses for behavior that I knew wasn't right. Telling myself he was just going through a rough patch, that unemployment was stressing him, that he'll get better once he found work." Ryan stepped forward slightly. "Sarah, if you don't mind me asking, what made you decide not to press federal charges? You'd be completely within your rights to do so."
Connor, Sarah said simply. "He loves his dad, despite everything. And I know that if Marcus goes to federal prison, Connor will blame himself for it. He's only 5. He doesn't understand that none of this was his fault. I can't put that burden on my son." The wisdom and compassion in her decisions struck me deeply. Here was a woman who had every reason to want revenge on the man who'd put her child in danger, but she was choosing Connor's emotional well-being over her own desire for justice. "That's incredibly mature of you," I said sincerely. "It's not about maturity," Sarah replied. "It's about being a mother. Everything I do has to be what's best for Connor, not what makes me feel better." Marcus appeared in the doorway of the main dining room, looking around uncertainly until he spotted our small group. He approached slowly, like he was walking to his own execution. "Sarah," he said quietly, "can we talk?" "We can talk right here," Sarah replied firmly. "I'm not going anywhere private with you." Marcus's face fell, but he nodded. "I understand. I wanted to apologize. To all of you, but especially to you and Connor. What I did tonight was inexcusable, and I know I've probably lost any chance of having a real relationship with my son."
You haven't lost that chance, Sarah said, surprising everyone, including herself, judging by her expression. But you've made it a lot harder. You're going to have to prove that you can be trusted with Connor's safety and emotional well-being, and that's going to take time, Marcus. A lot of time. I'll do whatever it takes, Marcus said, and for the first time all evening, he sounded like he truly meant it. I'll take the classes, do the therapy, get the help I should have gotten months ago. I don't want to lose him. Then you need to focus on getting healthy, Ryan said, not unkindly, not for Sarah, not to win Connor back, but because you need to become the kind of person who deserves to be in a child's life. Marcus looked at Ryan with something that might have been respectful. I can see why Alice chose you. You're nothing like me. No, Ryan agreed simply. I'm not. It wasn't cruel, just honest, and somehow that made it more impactful than any insult could have been. Jennifer appeared with Connor sleeping in her arms, his little face peaceful despite the chaos of the evening. I think it's time to get this young man home, she said softly. Sarah immediately reached for Connor, who stirred slightly but didn't wake up as he was transferred to his mother's arms. Thank you, she said to Jennifer, then looked around at all of us. Thank you all for handling this as well as you did. This could have been so much worse. Are you okay to drive? Ryan asked, ever the professional. It's been a long, stressful evening. I'm fine, assured him. Jennifer's going to follow me to make sure we get home safely. She adjusted Connor in her arms and looked at Marcus one final time. Marcus, you'll be hearing from the court about the custody modification within the next few days. I suggest you use that time to find a good lawyer and start looking into those programs I mentioned. Marcus nodded solemnly. I will. And Sarah, thank you for not pressing charges. I know you could have, and I know I deserved it. I didn't do it for you, Sarah said quietly. I did it for Connor. As Sarah and Jennifer headed toward the exit with Connor, I felt like I was watching the end of a very strange chapter in my life. Marcus stood watching them go, and I could see the exact moment he realized that his actions tonight had fundamentally changed his relationship with his son forever. Alice, Marcus said, turning back to me, I owe you an apology too, not just for tonight, but for how I treated you when we were together. I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and I realize I was a terrible boyfriend, controlling and jealous, and I made you unhappy, didn't I? The question caught him off guard. In all the years since our breakup, Marcus had never once acknowledged his role in our relationship's toxicity. Yes, I said honestly, you did make me unhappy. But Marcus, that was 4 years ago. I've moved on, and you need to move on too. Not by chasing fantasies about getting me back, but by becoming someone who can have healthy relationships with the people who are actually in your life. Marcus nodded slowly. You're right. I guess I've been stuck for a long time, thinking about all the things I messed up instead of trying to fix them. Ryan stepped closer to me, not in a possessive way, but in a supportive one. It's not too late to change, Marcus, but you have to want to change for yourself, not because you want to win someone back. I know, Marcus said, and I'm sorry for ruining your engagement party. You both deserve better than having your special night turned into this. I looked around the main dining room, where our friends and family members were still celebrating, laughing and dancing. The band was playing a lively song, and I could see my grandmother attempting to teach Ryan's father some complicated dance move that was making everyone laugh. You know what? I said, surprising myself. You didn't ruin it. You disrupted it, but you didn't ruin it. Because at the end of the day, the people who love us are still here, still celebrating with us, and I'm still engaged to an amazing man who showed me tonight exactly why I want to spend the rest of my life with him. Ryan squeezed my hand and smiled at me with such warmth that I felt like I might melt right there on the spot. Marcus managed a small, sad smile. I'm glad you found someone who makes you happy, Alice. I really am. And I hope, someday Connor will be proud to have me as his father. He will be, I said, meaning it. If you do the work, he will be. Marcus nodded, then looked around the room one last time. I should go. I need to drive back to Portland and start figuring out how to fix my life. As Marcus walked away, Ryan and I stood together watching him leave. I felt a sense of closure that I hadn't even realized I needed. "So," Ryan said, pulling me into his arms as the band started playing a slow song, "ready to get back to celebrating our engagement? I believe I still owe you that perfect engagement party you were dreaming about." I laughed and let him lead me back onto the dance floor. I think tonight was perfect in its own weird way. After all, how many people can say their engagement party included an FBI reveal and a custody drama? "Hopefully not many," Ryan said dryly, spinning me around. "I prefer my celebrations with less federal law enforcement involvement." "Even when you're the federal law enforcement?" I teased. "Especially then." As we danced, surrounded by our friends and family, I realized that Marcus had actually given us an unexpected gift. He'd shown us how solid our relationship really was, how well we handled crises together, and how much trust we had in each other, even when everything seemed to be falling apart. 3 months later, Ryan and I had a beautiful wedding with no uninvited guests, no surprise revelations, and no custody disputes. Connor sent me a drawing of dinosaurs dancing at a wedding, which Sarah had helped him mail to us, along with a note saying that Marcus was doing much better in his court-mandated therapy and had started supervised visits that were going well. Sometimes, the best love stories aren't the ones without drama. They're the ones where the drama reveals just how strong your love really is.
But the story doesn't quite end there. About a week after our engagement party, I got a phone call that I wasn't expecting. It was from Detective Lisa Rodriguez from the Portland Police Department. "Miss Thompson," she said, "I'm calling because we've been investigating some additional aspects of the Marcus Caldwell case, and we discovered something that I think you should know about." My heart immediately started racing. Is Connor okay? Is Sarah okay? "Everyone is fine," Detective Rodriguez assured me quickly. "But during our investigation into Mr. Caldwell's recent behavior patterns, we discovered that his actions weren't quite as spontaneous as he claimed." I put the phone on speaker so Ryan could hear, since he was sitting at my kitchen table grading what looked like case reports. He immediately looked up with sharp attention. "What do you mean?" I asked. "We found evidence that Mr. Caldwell had been tracking your social media accounts for months, possibly years. He knew about your engagement, he knew where you worked, he even knew about your engagement party location and date. The story about randomly seeing a woman at a grocery store appears to have been fabricated." The blood drained from my face. He'd been stalking me? Not in the traditional sense. He wasn't physically following you or attempting to contact you directly, but he was monitoring your online presence extensively. We found screenshots of your Instagram posts, Facebook updates, even your LinkedIn profile saved on his computer. He had detailed notes about your daily routines, your relationship with Agent Mitchell, and your social activities. Ryan was already pulling out his own phone, probably to contact his colleagues. "Detective Rodriguez, this is Agent Ryan Mitchell, FBI. What's the timeline on this surveillance behavior?" "Based on the digital evidence, it appears to have started about 18 months ago, shortly after Miss Thompson began posting pictures with you, Agent Mitchell. The monitoring intensified significantly after your engagement announcement." I sank into a chair, feeling sick. So the whole thing about Connor and thinking I was hiding his child, that was all planned? "We believe Mr. Caldwell used Connor as an excuse to confront you, hoping that claiming you had a secret child would create enough chaos and emotional manipulation to disrupt your engagement. The grocery store story was likely concocted to make his actions seem more understandable and less premeditated." Ryan's jaw was tight with controlled anger. "Have you shared this information with Sarah Winters?" "Yes, we briefed her yesterday. She's understandably upset and is now considering pressing additional charges for stalking and harassment. She's also requested that the supervised visitation agreement include mandatory psychological evaluation and ongoing monitoring." After we hung up, Ryan and I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. The revelation that Marcus had been essentially stalking me for over a year completely reframed everything that had happened at our engagement party. "Alice," Ryan said finally, "I need to ask you something, and please don't take this the wrong way, but have you noticed anything unusual over the past year? Unexpected encounters, feeling like someone was watching you? Anything that seemed off?" I thought back through the months, trying to remember if there had been any signs I'd missed. There were a few times when I felt like someone was following me after work, but I chalked it up to city paranoia.
And there was this weird incident about 6 months ago where someone had been through my mailbox. Letters were moved around, but nothing was missing, so I figured it was just a postal service mistake. Anything else? Actually, yes. Remember that weekend when we went to Napa for wine tasting? I could have sworn I saw Marcus at one of the wineries, but when I looked again, the person was gone, and I convinced myself I was being paranoid. Ryan's expression grew even more serious. Alice, that wasn't paranoia. You were right to trust your instincts. The next few days were a whirlwind of police interviews, security consultations, and legal consultations. Ryan arranged for additional security measures at both my apartment and workplace, while Detective Rodriguez worked with the Portland DA's office to determine what additional charges might be filed against Marcus. Sarah called me directly 3 days later, and her voice was a mixture of rage and exhaustion. "Alice, I am so sorry," she said immediately. "I had no idea Marcus was capable of this level of deception and manipulation. When I think about how he used Connor as a prop in his stalking scheme—" "Sarah, you don't need to apologize for his actions," I told her firmly. "You're as much a victim in this as I am. The police told me they found evidence that he'd been planning this confrontation for months. He had detailed plans about how to disrupt your engagement party, backup scenarios if the child claim didn't work, even research about Agent Mitchell's background and FBI protocols. This wasn't some spontaneous breakdown. This was calculated manipulation." I felt cold all over. What's going to happen now? I'm pressing charges, all of them. Stalking, harassment, child endangerment, custodial interference, everything the DA will allow. Connor deserves better than having a father who would use him as a weapon in some twisted revenge fantasy. How is Connor handling all this? Sarah's voice softened. He's confused but resilient. I've got him in counseling to help him process what happened. The therapist says kids are remarkably adaptable, but I want to make sure he doesn't carry any trauma from his father's actions. 2 weeks later, Marcus was arrested on multiple charges. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Not just the digital stalking, but also testimony from Sarah, Connor, and numerous witnesses from our engagement party. Ryan's colleagues had built an airtight case that painted a picture of escalating obsessive behavior and premeditated harassment. The trial was scheduled for several months out, but Marcus's lawyer contacted us about a plea deal. He was willing to plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a sentence that would include mandatory long-term psychiatric treatment instead of just prison time. "What do you think?" I asked Ryan, as we sat in the prosecutor's office discussing the plea agreement. "I think Sarah should make that decision," Ryan said. "She's the one who has to live with the long-term consequences of whatever happens to Marcus." Sarah ultimately accepted the plea deal, but with strict conditions. Marcus would serve 2 years in a minimum security facility with psychiatric treatment, followed by 5 years of supervised probation with mandatory therapy, and no contact with either Sarah's family or me. He would also lose all parental rights to Connor, who would be adopted by Sarah's long-term partner, Daniel, whom she'd started dating seriously during the months following the engagement party incident.
The whole experience changed how Ryan and I approached our relationship and our future together. We had long conversations about security, about the risks that came with both of our careers. My marketing work sometimes involved high-profile clients who attracted unwanted attention, and about how we would handle future threats or challenges. We also talked extensively about starting our own family someday and how we would protect our children from the kind of manipulation and trauma that Connor experienced. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Marcus had succeeded in disrupting our engagement?" I asked Ryan one evening as we planned our wedding. "No," Ryan said without hesitation, "because there was never any scenario where that would have worked. You know why?" "Why?" "Because what we have isn't fragile enough to be broken by someone else's delusions and manipulation. Marcus fundamentally misunderstood what love actually looks like. He thought if he created enough chaos and drama, you'd somehow realize you wanted him back. But real love isn't about chaos and drama. It's about partnership, trust, and choosing each other every day, even when things get difficult." Our wedding 6 months later was everything our engagement party hadn't been: peaceful, joyful, and completely free of unexpected guests or federal investigations. Connor sent us another drawing, this one showing a happy family with a mommy, a new daddy named Daniel, a little girl named Emma, and a dinosaur that he'd labeled Rex the Protector. Sarah included a note saying that Connor was thriving in therapy and had started calling Daniel Daddy without any prompting from her.
Marcus had been transferred to a psychiatric facility in Oregon where he was reportedly making progress in treatment, though he still had years of supervised probation ahead of him. As for the random woman at the grocery store who had supposedly triggered Marcus's entire scheme, Detective Rodriguez eventually tracked her down during the investigation. Her name was Jennifer Walsh. She had a 5-year-old son named Colin, not Connor, and she looked nothing like me, beyond being blonde and approximately the same height. Marcus had fabricated the entire encounter as a cover story for his premeditated stalking behavior. The experience taught me valuable lessons about trusting my instincts, the importance of digital privacy and security, and the difference between healthy love and obsessive fixation. But most importantly, it showed me exactly the kind of partner I had in Ryan, someone who could handle a crisis with calm professionalism without never losing sight of what really mattered, protecting the people he loved and building a life based on honesty and mutual respect. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how dramatically our engagement party ended, and the answer is always no. That night revealed the truth about Marcus's mental state, protected Connor from further manipulation, and showed Ryan and me exactly how strong our partnership really was. And as for Marcus, well, let's just say that seeing a random woman at a grocery store has never again seemed like grounds for a cross-state road trip. Some lessons, apparently, you only need to learn once, preferably in a supervised psychiatric facility with a very good therapist. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.